Hey guys, today I would like to share my testimony with you. And yeah, I'll just jump into it. How I met God, how I became a Christian, and how I actually got connected to God and my life really changed. And yes, so I became a Christian as a child, like even at 5 years old, I was always like dreaming about Jesus, and I heard all the stories from the Bible. I grew up in church, and my parents are Christian too, and they gave me a lot of good input. And at night, I even imagined like hugging Jesus when I hugged my blanket. And yes, so when I was 13, my parents divorced, and that was a very hard time for me. And also, as a child, I was bullied in school, and I was very shy because of that. And I moved to a different place, and like with 14, I was kind of connected to some people in school who were not the best influence. And then I realized, okay, this is not really good for my life. Actually, if God really exists, I want to meet him and I want to live with him, because I read in the Bible the many stories about how Jesus did miracles and how people's life changed. And I was so amazed by it, and I thought, like, okay, if this God really exists, then he can do the same miracles in my life too. And the only reason I don't experience it is because I'm not really close to God. So I started reading my Bible more, I started praying more, and I had a lot of wounds in my heart, and I was constantly falling in love, and I had a lot of damage. One time when I was 16, I said, okay, I was so in love with this guy, and I said, okay, if he doesn't love me back, I will kill myself. And that was just a bad idea, really, but it was getting closer and closer, like the date I set up to finish my life. And then I got help just a few weeks before. Like, people realized, oh, Sarah, she's really depressed and there's really something going on. I got into the hospital, and there I was praying a lot and like reading my Bible, and I was actually glad about my like that people said, or like the doctor said, hey, you have depression and this is not normal what you have. Like, I was glad because it meant, oh, so myself, it's actually different. I just have this illness that is impacting me so hard in my life. And suddenly the depression and the big sadness in me was something separate, but it was still there. And one evening I read a book about being thankful, and how God can transform people by being thankful. And I read this book, and about 40 pages in, I prayed to God, okay, God. And I prayed the most honest prayer of my life. I prayed, okay, God, if you really want to do something with my life, I need you to save me, because else I'm dead next week, because I'm really this close to killing myself. And I thanked him that he made me, and even though I really didn't believe something would happen, but it was kind of my last hope in that moment. And a few hours after the prayer, like 2-3 hours later, suddenly there was so much joy in my heart. It was like my heart turned to gold, and the rest of my body was still black, but it was like my heart turned to gold, and I had so much joy. I was so happy. And it was really strange being in the mental hospital, and I'm the super happy person there suddenly, and everyone else is still depressed. And it really changed my life, that moment. But at the same time, something bad happened. I heard a voice speaking to me. And the thing is, now looking back, it wasn't God's voice speaking. It was the devil hijacking it. And he told me 3 things. They looked good at the moment, and I was very happy to hear them, but the fruits of them were very bad. Like, one thing was that I won't die, I will live, and I will live a long life, which is a good thing. The second one was that I should preach the gospel, and that put a lot of pressure on me because, man, I was still mentally ill at that point in time. And the third thing, yeah, you will meet your husband in 1 year. And because I had a big wound in relationships and I really wanted love, to be loved, and that gave me a lot of hope, and I was super happy to hear that, oh wow, God spoke this, it's such a big revelation, I'm so happy, I'm so excited, who is it? But the fruit of it it was so bad. Like, I was constantly, when I was meeting guys, I was constantly like, is this my husband or not? Like, I was constantly checking. I was falling in love with nearly every guy that I found attractive or that I met, because I was, oh, this must be my husband. This must be him. And I was 16 at that time. It was really crazy. Like, it was not the good thing for my heart to happen. It was really the devil giving me a prophecy that looked super promising and super hopeful. And when it didn't happen, like when I didn't meet my husband in that year, and I was devastated. And then I was like, oh, maybe I understood it wrong. Maybe I heard it wrong. And I was still very attached to that prophecy. And yeah, so my whole life from being 16, it was like a mix of being with God, but also like the devil or the religious spirit, which is this voice that's imitating God, but it's actually the devil, kind of taking control of my life. And sooner, like in the process, I started to hear less and less from the real God. I started to hear more from the devil imitating God. And my life went pretty interesting ways, and it slowly went down and down and down. Like, it was crazy. Now looking back, I see it, but about 9 months after that experience where I had this sudden joy in my heart, like I was, for 9 months, I was going to therapy, and it was helping me a little bit. I was like adapting to it. And then after 9 months, I had another encounter with this religious spirit, and he told me to quit school. I was 1 year away of finishing school and getting my Abitur, which is a good school. Like, basically, if you get your Abitur, you can study. If you don't have it, you can't study. And like 1 year away, and I was best of my class, suddenly this voice in my head tells me to quit school and go to a Bible school. I really thought it was God, and I had this big desire to follow God and to live with God, to do everything He says, because I loved God. I was so happy. And because of that experience with my depression and how I didn't kill myself, but I found new hope in my life, I was like, okay, I owe my whole life to God now, so I do what He says. But then the devil used that and hijacked the voice in my head and got me to quit school. So I went to the Bible school. In the Bible school, I suddenly got another revelation from the religious spirit, which was, this whole desire to be loved and to have a husband. It comes from being raped as a 3-year-old, or like being sexually abused was actually the thing, and that you just forgot it. And that's crazy. That's not something God does. But I didn't know, and I thought like, wow, this is so crazy, and I have these strong emotions, I have a memory coming back, and I really believed that it was God. And I was like, was working strongly inside of me. And also I told it to other people, and I was crying so hard, and they also prayed about it, and they felt that it was really from God. But the issue was I didn't have discernment, and the other people I prayed with, they also didn't have discernment on hearing God's voice really clearly. And yeah, so I was under the impression that I was sexually abused as a child, and I had a lot of anger and pain because of that memory that wasn't really true. And I even did some process, but it never went fully away. Like, even though God revealed it to me, it was still a burden, and I could never fully heal it. And yes, then I was doing an apprenticeship as an optician, and I got connected to a church that's very about being a disciple, and many people there have a good heart, and I was really excited to be in that church, but they also didn't hear God completely clearly, so some mixed voices got into them, and sometimes it was God doing things and things happened, and sometimes it was the devil imitating God. And in that church I also got under more and more impressions and more prophecies that were set out to destroy me, and more lies got into me. It was like my picture of being a disciple of Jesus was like, okay, being a disciple is suffering. I only work for God. God is basically, I'm a slave to God, and I do whatever He says, and my big purpose is to evangelize people. Even if I don't like evangelizing, I have to do it, and that's like the goal. And like my spiritual growth was all about getting to heal people, evangelizing and prophesying, but it was never about healing my heart and having joy and finding peace and all of that. It was a lot about reading the Bible and praying. At one time I was convinced that the internet is evil and I'm not allowed to use internet, so I wanted to stop using my phone and all of that. And it was kind of like going into directions of a sect that was in my mind, because the devil was basically speaking to me. And I got more and more into, like, just by my personal time with God, which was the religious spirit in that time, I got more and more into listening to the wrong voice and getting damaged. And like at one time then I quit my apprenticeship and I started to work I started to go to an art school in Munich. And even there, like, because I was so restricted, I couldn't partake of some of the classes, because I thought, oh, this is God doesn't allow me to do that and stuff. And I was very lonely. I had no friends in Munich. I was living next to the first concentration camp site, and I basically, my life got worse and worse. I got into debt because of the art school, and because I thought that God really wanted me to do that. And again, my life got worse bit by bit. And then at some point I was crying every week, or like every 2 weeks I broke down crying, and I didn't know what was going on. And also in that time I was more and more convinced, okay, God really wants me to go to Peru and be a missionary there and evangelize the whole country, and it's my responsibility, and if I don't do it, it's my fault that those people go to hell. And all of that, it was a big pressure for me. I was trying to learn Spanish, it didn't work. I still had a lot of issues in my heart that I couldn't heal, or I didn't even know how to heal them. And because my heart was screaming so hard, I was like, okay, that's that's just my flesh who doesn't want to follow Jesus. And then I chose to disconnect from my heart, and it made things even worse. And so at that time I was growing in discipleship. I was like preaching on the streets, even though it was putting me in a lot of anxiety, and I felt big pressure to do that. And I was casting out demons and praying for stuff like that. I had a lot of responsibility, and I also was very prophetic, but I was connected to the wrong voice, and the whole fruits in my life got worse and worse. But I thought it's God testing me, and it's a training season, and that's why my life is so bad, or like the suffering I experienced, that God will bring some good fruits out of it. But it was basically just the devil using Christianity and the Bible as a farce to ruin my life and to torment me. Make sense? And in that time, at one point I was like, okay, I really need to change something, but I didn't even know what to change. And then a friend connected me with Mile, who I'm doing this YouTube channel together, and he was like, hey, maybe if you want to get rid of that confusion, just have a call with him. And I had my first call with him, and Mile helped me to get out of this. And I was in a really bad place. Like one time I had no money for 2 weeks. I was living by faith in the religious spirit, and I had no money the whole time. I got some money, and I was basically, but it was always not enough. And now I know that God does it differently. But like in my time in the religious spirit, I hungered for 1 week, and I had no friends. I had a lot of torment inside. I had a lot of pressure to do things for God, and that's not really God. It's not who the God of Christianity really is. And you know, I see like Jesus is real, and Jesus really changed my life, and I will share that in a moment. But I was in the bad part of Christianity where God is not really in there, but there's a lot of religion and pressure and rules. And the church I went to, they invented more and more rules. At one point they said that the vaccine will, if you get vaccinated against COVID, you will get a demon. Some others said it's sinful to use condoms if you're married, because that's not trusting God. And others, I heard people say that you should give 2 hours and 20 minutes of your time every day to God, because that's the tenth, like the tithe of your time, which is, all of that doesn't make any sense. And like you were not allowed to go to the doctor or to take medication if you have pain, especially after you prayed for healing, because then you don't really trust God in the healing. It was a lot of like twisting the Bible, and it's the same you can see when you look at the story of Jesus in the desert, how he was tempted by the devil. There, at one point, the devil takes out the Bible and even twists it to get Jesus to do what he wants. But with Jesus it didn't work. With me it worked, and for 5 years I was living with what I thought was God, but it was the religious spirit, and it really hurt me badly. So then this friend connected me with Mile, and I had my call with him, and he said to me, hey, if you hear a voice and bad fruit come out of it, even though it looks very Christian and very biblical, that's not God's voice. That's the devil speaking to you. And I was very shocked at that moment. But by starting the process, the coaching process with Mile, I learned to really hear God's voice and to discern His voice. Because I was able to hear His voice, but I didn't know the difference between God and the devil. And He showed me, okay, if you have good fruits coming out of it, if you have clarity, and no confusion, if you ask God, is that really you? And you hear yes 3 times. And by doing all of that, we also explain that in another video of ours. Check it out. I'll put it down below. By doing all of that, I learned how to really discern God's voice. And I think I started 2021 in November. I started my coaching with Mael, and in January 1st I moved to another city, and I got in my apartment like 1 week before, and I was praying so hard for God to do something. And back then in my life I was praying very hard for things and they didn't happen. And then I prayed for this apartment, and then suddenly it happened, and I got a room in this new city I wanted to move to. And I was so excited and so surprised, and I moved there, and like a few days later I got a job offer for a really good job with way more money than I expected to get. And that was how I could really see good fruits happening in my life, by starting to hear God clearly and to do discernment. And I worked really hard on discernment. Everything I heard in my mind, I would check it so hard. I would take maybe 5 minutes even on some things I heard to really make sure it's not the devil speaking to me. And so I continued doing discernment. I continued on healing my heart, renouncing lies, healing all these big wounds I had, and like the wound of rejection, the wound of wanting to be loved and never having a husband, and all of that. I worked with God and with Mael to heal that, and now I can say I'm way more stable. It's like, that was 1 year ago, and it's so crazy. It's I can't even believe it, because I'm a different person now. Like all of the time in my life I tried to continue and to work on me, and it never worked because I was tuned into the wrong voice. And now I'm really tuned into God, and I can see crazy and good things happening to me. Like 2 weeks ago I was in Paris, and I had a quick stop there to change trains. I had to go from one train station to the other train station by metro through Paris. And I was like, it's so close, I think I'm gonna miss my train. And then I missed it, and I was like, God, why did you do this? I was a bit pissed. And then I felt God say to me, hey, I will clear things up, I'll give you a free ticket. I was like, yeah, sure. But I just went to the service station and said like, hey, I missed my train. And from just in 2 minutes, like I waited some time, someone came to me, and after 2 minutes of talking to him, he didn't really ask why I missed my train, or it was kind of crazy. Then he just gave me a ticket for the first class, a free ticket. And I was like, wow, this is really God speaking, because when God really speaks, things happen, and things happen like God says them. And now I see a lot of miracles in my life. I especially have more and more peace in my heart. I continue to do the inner work with me. I'm growing so much. I'm growing out of perfectionism and out of all the wounds, out of shyness. I'm having a lot of progress. I started to love myself finally. I started to accept myself. I started to find out what I really wanted in life, because my whole life I was going in different directions and quitting everything, and I was always searching what God wanted for me. And now I know that God's will and my will, it's really close together, and God doesn't ask me to go to Peru and do like work as a missionary if that's not really a good fit for me. And yeah, so that's my testimony. If you have any questions, you can ask them below. If you have a similar experience, I'm really excited to see your comments. And yeah, if you want more videos from us, just ask and you shall receive. Like, we're really happy to make videos for you. And if you also want to, if you have a similar story, if you're also stuck in the religious spirit, you can contact me and we'll find a way of working together. And I'm really excited to help you out of that. And yes, so see you next time. Bye!